Good afternoon, listeners, and welcome to Get Life Educational Empowerment. Get it together, live in full expectancy. Educational empowerment on the Awesome Radio Network, broadcasting on WECU 107.5 FM and 1570 AM. And if you're joining us live on Awesome Radio, Facebook, or YouTube, welcome to our viewing audience, or should I say, welcome back. I am your host, Sherida Suggs, educator, principal, coach, motivator, and your partner in purpose. As we get it together, today our message title is Cultural Inclusivity Part 3, School, Family, and Community. We're diving deep into what it looks and feels like to build schools, families, and communities where every student belongs, every voice is heard, and every culture is honored. We'll explore practical ways educators, parents, students, and community members can bridge gaps, strengthen relationships, and create environments where equity is lived, not just talked about. From honoring the power of a student's name to teaching history through a lens of triumph to building trust and connection across differences, today's broadcast is all about turning inclusion from concept to action that transforms learning relationships and communities. So get ready. Let's get it together. Live it full expectancy and empower education like never before. With Valentine's Day just behind us, it's the perfect time to celebrate you, the ones showing up day in and day out for students, families, and communities. To the educators leading classrooms and lives with intention, to the parents and caregivers juggling a million roles with love and resilience, to the students carving out your place, discovering who you are and discovering your strengths, claiming your voice, to the mentors, community leaders, and shape partners who show up with guidance, wisdom, and heart. This moment is for you. You are seen, you are valued, you are essential, not just for what you do, but for who you are, your perspective, your care, your commitments. Without you, the work of education can never be possible. Every small act counts. So let this be your reminder today. You make a difference, you create belonging, and you inspire growth. Family, we want to take a special moment to honor our bus drivers, especially following Bus Driver Appreciation Week. You are the unsung heroes who ensure that every student arrives safely and on time. You greet students with a smile and you often set the tone for the day before anyone even enters the classroom. You are a steady hand behind the wheel, the faces of calm and care on every route, the champions who keeps our students safe, supported, and ready to learn. Your dedication matters more than words can express. And your impact echoes far beyond the first stop and the first bell ring. This Valentine's Day season lets us know that Get Life celebrates you. We admire you. We honor the love and the care that you pour into our students, families, and communities. Because what you give changes lives. And family, that's the kind of love that lasts forever. Today, I want to invite you into a feeling. Think about a space where you walked in and you immediately felt safe, a place where you didn't have to code switch, a place where you didn't have to shrink, a place where you didn't have to explain yourself before you could exist. That feeling, that deep exhale is belonging. And belonging does not happen by accident, it happens by design. Today, we're going to explore what a culturally inclusive school, family, and community looks like and feels like. Because inclusion isn't about a policy, it's not just programming, it's not just posters on a wall. I want to take a moment to talk about the scholars whose work grounds most of this conversation. Gloria Ladster Billings. She is an African American educational theorist, former classroom teacher, and nationally respected researcher whose work has reshaped how we think about equity in schools. She was born in Philadelphia and began her work as a classroom teacher. That truly matters because her scholarship isn't abstract. It is rooted in real classrooms, real children, and real communities. She later earned her PhD from Stanford University, and she went on to become a professor at University of Madison, Wisconsin. She became one of the most influential voices in educational research. She also served as president of the American Educational Research Association, one of the largest and most respected educational research organizations in the world. Dr. Lasson Billings is best known for developing the theory of culturally relevant pedagogy in the 1990s, at a time when many conversations about students of color was framed around deficits, what students lacked, what families weren't doing, and what communities were missing. She shifted the narrative. Instead of asking what's wrong with these students, she asked what's wrong with the system. She argued that culturally relevant teaching must do three things: it must provide academic success, it must help students maintain a cultural competence, meaning that they do not have to lose their identity in order to succeed. And third, it develops critical consciousness, giving students the tools to recognize and challenge inequity in society. She also challenged the popular phrase achievement gap, urging educators to consider what she called the education debt, the historical, economic, and instructional inequities that schools owe to marginalized communities. Her work transformed teachers' preparation programs, equity policies, and inclusive curriculum design across the country and beyond. So, when we say that culturally relevant education is not about sprinkling cultural on top of curriculum, but about centering students, lived experiences, and learning, we are building on the powerful foundation laid by Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings. Her work reminds us that belonging is not just an accessory to education, it is essential to education. A cultural, inclusive school looks intentional. When you walk into a building, you see multiple languages represented, not just in small print at the bottom of a flyer, but boldly displayed. You see pictures of students that look like the students in the building, along with students of pictures of students that are not inside the building, but with a focus of celebrating our population. What positive contribution have the students in our school made? You see students' artwork that reflects different traditions, histories, and identities. You walk into the library and you find stories written by authors like Jason Reynolds and Elizabeth Acevedo. Stories where students of color are not side characters, but heroes. You see Indigenous histories taught beyond a single month. You see Asian, African, Latino, Middle Eastern, and European histories taught not as add ons, but as integral to the story of our world. Are there stories written by students in your classroom, in your school, in your community library? Are there illustrated books with pictures that look like the scholars that we serve? Does your library represent different cultures equally, or are there more of one culture? Students enjoy reading about people that look like them. It gives them a sense of belonging and encouragement, knowing that there is someone outside of their world that succeeded. It gives them the strength to succeed. It feels like an environment where students' names are pronounced correctly. And let me pause for a second. Because this matters more than we sometimes realize. In culturally inclusive environments, we put respect on a person's name. We serve in schools where students and teachers and staff members represent different cultures, languages, and traditions. That means we will encounter names that may be unfamiliar to us, names that may not roll off of the tip of our tongue easily, names that may require us to slow down. But a person's name is not an inconvenience. A person's name is their identity. It is the first gift that they were given. It carries family history, it carries culture, it carries meaning, it carries stories. Say their names. So when we immediately shorten someone's name, when we assign them a nickname because it's easier for us to pronounce, when we say, "Do you have something else I can call you?" What are we communicating to them? We are saying to them that their name is not important to you. You are saying to them that their name is an inconvenience. This is their identity. And it is very important to respect a person's identity. Just because their name is too complicated for our comfort, that is not inclusion. Inclusion says, "Help me say your name correctly. Teach me how to say your name. I want to honor your name." Now, will we get it perfect every time? No. But effort communicates respect. Trying communicates care. Slowing down communicates value. And when a teacher takes the time to understand how to pronounce a student's name, when a coworker takes the time to pronounce a colleague's name and practice it until they get it right, that person feels seen. When a principal introduces a staff member and ensures that their name is pronounced properly, that staff member feels appreciated. When classmates learn each other's name instead of shortening them for convenience, that builds community because names are not just labels, they are identities, dignity, belonging. So, in a culturally inclusive school, we don't rush past names, we honor names. We practice names. We learn them the best that we can. Because when we put respect on a person's name, we put respect on the person. Cultural attire is welcome, not questioned, while at the same time, we do teach our young boys and girls how to honor themselves with their attire, meaning they respect themselves and others by covering their personal apparel and body parts. Hairstyles are not policed, home languages are treated as assets. It looks like staff who respect the diversity of students and each other, or leadership that is actively working toward that goal. But more than that, it looks like curriculum that asks, whose story is missing? What does a culturally inclusive school sound like? In a culturally inclusive school, you hear different things like teachers asking, "What do you think? How do you feel? What is your perspective? How does this connect to your experience?" You hear students using question stems. You hear students speaking in more than one language and not being corrected. You hear multiple perspectives in history discussions throughout the entire school year, not just in one singular month. You hear restorative conversations instead of blame and automatic punishments. Instead of "what's wrong with the student," you hear "what happened? How can we repair this harm?" Can you take the time to think about how another person feels when you do or say this? This work has been deeply influenced by thinkers like Paulo Freire, who believed education should be a dialogue, not a dictatorship, and by educators like Zoretta Hammond, who reminded us that culture shapes how students process information, build trust, and engage in learning. So, culturally inclusive schools understand that engagement is not compliance. Quiet does not mean learning, and differences does not mean deficit. So, what does a culturally inclusive school feel like? Let's talk about it. Because policies matter, but feelings shape memory. In a culturally inclusive school, students feel safe to speak. They feel safe to question respectfully, safe to be wrong with soft correction, safe to be proud of who they are, safe to be proud of their work. A culturally inclusive school is a place where families do not feel like guests. They feel like stakeholders. They feel like they are welcome to take part. They feel seen when a teacher references a holiday that they celebrate. They feel valued when their home language is incorporated into a lesson. They feel respected when their identity is not debated. And here's something important: belonging does not mean agreement, it means dignity. It means I can disagree with you and still feel human in this space. When schools create that feeling, academic outcomes rise. Attendance improves, discipline disparities shrink, but most importantly, children grow into adults who know how to exist in diverse spaces without fear and while respecting others around them. When we return from our break, we're going to talk about culturally inclusivity in our families and our communities. Don't you dare go anywhere. You're listening to the Awesome Radio Network, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You're tuned into Get Life Educational Empowerment here on the Awesome Radio Network. I am your host, Sherida Suggs, and I am thrilled that you are here with us today as we continue fueling your day with motivation, insight, and empowerment. If you would like to engage more, interact, and be a guest on our show, please email me at getlifeempowerment@gmail.com. That is GIT, get it together, live, live in full expectancy at gmail.com. GITLIFEEMPOWERMENT at gmail.com. Or you can call into the radio station at 252-756-2008 and leave a message if our lines are full. Here at Get Life Educational Empowerment, we believe in educational abundance, strong schools, strong relationships, strong futures. When we get it together and live in full expectancy, we don't just hope for better, we build better. In family, we thrive together, we grow together, and we are indeed better together. Now, let's shift from school buildings into living rooms because inclusion starts long before a child enters a classroom. And it is very important for our parents to know that inclusivity does start in the home. Inclusive families model curiosity. When a child says, why does their family do that? Why do they look that way? Why do they dress that way? Why do they dance that way? Why do they eat this type of food? It is important for our response to be reflected upon the respect that we show to people who do not look and act like us. When our students say that's weird, we have to respond in a way that helps them to understand that there is a normalcy in other people's culture that we may not understand. However, we can take the time to learn. We can say to our students, that's interesting. Let's learn more. Do research with your students to help them to understand the people around them. Because let's keep it real, no two people are the same, no two cultures are the same. We can learn to value other people, their cultures, without devaluing ourselves. Other people's cultures can be introduced to your students by showing them books, showing them pictures, showing them movies about your culture as well as other people's culture. It is important for our students to know that when they step outside of the contents of their own home, that they are going to see and experience people that do not look like them. However, it is important to first respect and love ourselves, but to also learn to respect others. When we learn to respect others, that does not mean that we have to take on their beliefs, but it does mean that we have to respect them as people. Students can understand that there is life beyond their own experiences. They can speak about their own heritage with pride without placing it above of others. They understand that identities is not a threat, but it's a gift. They correct stereotypes gently but firmly. They do not avoid hard conversations about race, language, or ability. They instead lean into it. When a child experiences bias at school and comes home upset, parents, be an inclusive family member and explain to your child that you believe them and you believe in them. You understand that what happened should not have happened, and help your child to positively learn how to communicate, share their thoughts, share their feelings, and get through the situation in a positive manner. Help your child to get through it. Help their child by saying, let's figure this out together. When a child in your family says something insensitive, don't shame the child, but guide the child. Say, let's talk about why that might hurt someone. A culturally inclusive family feels like accountability wrapped in love. It feels like safety. It feels like a place where you can ask questions without being embarrassed. Because here is the get life truth: children will not develop cultural competence if the adults in their lives are silent, or if the adults in their lives speak ignorance to them. With that being said, please, parents and caregivers, be careful of what you say about other people that do not look and act like you, because what you say does strongly influence the scholar that is in your home, the scholar that you are setting an example for. Remember that prejudice begins at home, that bias begins at home. You are your children's greatest examples, and they follow you. So allow your children to follow you with dignity. Allow your children to learn how to respect others from you. Let's not display prejudice or injustice. Silence teaches just as boldly as speech. Inclusive families understand that raising culturally aware children is not political, it is preparation for the real world. Now, let's talk about communities. Community members, we're going to zoom out in even further, because schools and families do not exist in isolation. They exist inside communities. So we want our community members to understand this, that children are children. And so when you are out in society and you experience a child that does not look like you and does not act the way that you feel like they should act, rather than give them the side eye, it is okay to either A, walk away, or B, offer constructive help. But please do not see, judge them. When a child experiences prejudice outside of their home, it stays with them, and they carry it with them into the school, and they carry it with them within the choices that they make. So let's remember that as a community member, we honor who we are, and we respect others. Community is visible. You see different people, different looks, different styles. You experience different types of music. You see cultural festivals that are collaborative, not performative. You see local businesses owned by diverse entrepreneurs being supported by everyone with intention. You see public meetings that translation services are provided. You see public spaces that are accessible for people with disabilities in cities like Toronto and in my very own neighborhood. We are represented by different cultures and different diversities. Different people exist and contribute to a shared civic identity by maintaining our unique traditions. This is the same in my community and my school community. We have different cultures that coexist and we help each other. But inclusion is not just about proximity, it's about equity. An inclusive community examines its systems. Who has access to affordable housing? Who has access to quality healthcare? Whose voices are represented in leadership? Who is missing from decision making tables? Inclusion is structural, not just social. In an inclusive community, you hear collaboration, you hear laughter, you can hear the sound of the drum line, you can hear community action, you can hear positivity. You hear school leaders talking with faith leaders. You hear youth voices invited into city planning and discussions. You hear disagreements handled through dialogue rather than division. You hear problems being solved. You hear ownership statements like, that's our responsibility, not that's not my issue or that's not my problem. Inclusive communities understand that belonging is connected to public health, economic growth, and social stability. When people feel valued, they invest. When people feel excluded, they withdraw. Communities that prioritize community builds resilience together. A culturally inclusive community feels like walking into a public space and not wondering if you're welcome. It feels like hearing your language in public announcements. It feels like seeing someone who looks like you in leadership. But not only that, it feels like honoring and respecting that leader in that leadership position. It feels like safety without surveillance. It feels like diversity without tokenism. It feels like shared humanity. Young people raised in inclusive communities develop cultural intelligence. They become adaptable, empathetic, globally prepared. They learn how to collaborate across differences. And that is one of the most essential skills that they need for the future. So let's bring this together. A culturally inclusive school feels like belonging and learning. A culturally inclusive family feels like belonging at home. A culturally inclusive community feels like belonging in the world. The work is not about perfection, it is about intention. It is about asking who feels unseen, who feels unheard, who feels unsafe, and then designing spaces where everyone feels included. Because belonging is not accidental, it is constructive, it is protected, it is nurtured, it is intentional. And when we build systems where every child, every family, every community member feels valued, we do more than create inclusive spaces. We create possibility. Thank you so much for being a part of this work. And thank you for choosing belonging on purpose. Well, It's time for another break. When we return, we're going to talk about how Black history can be taught in a culturally inclusive school in a way that honors truth and acknowledges trauma, but gives us a bridge from trauma to triumph. We're going to also talk about the three T's: teaching, thinking, and talking, which is an idea that was shared with me by one of my very own classmates, Jamaica Dixon. And I thank you so much for partnering with us, Jamaica. I also thank you to our listeners, our viewers, and our community members for being in partnership with Get Life Educational Empowerment and Awesome Radio Network. We'll be right back. Don't you dare go anywhere. We're just getting started. One. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to Get Life Educational Empowerment on Awesome Radio at WECU 107.5 FM and 1570 AM. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. This section is going to be dedicated to one of my classmates and our community members who gave me this idea showing hope in the future, teaching, thinking, and talking, choosing the T. So thank you so much for this connection to Jamaica Dixon, class of 1998. As we move forward into this conversation about cultural inclusivity, I want to anchor us into something powerful. How can we show hope in the future with teaching, thinking, and talking, choosing the T? Because inclusion is not only about what we correct, it is about what we cultivate next. So, future teaching must be intentional, not reactive, not performative, but intentional. Teaching that sees a whole child. It connects curriculum to live experiences. Teaching that does not erase authenticity, but expands possibility. Hope filled teaching says, I see you. Your history matters. Your voice belongs here. And your future is not limited by your past. When we teach from that place, we don't just transfer information, we transfer confidence, dignity, and belief. Now, let's talk about thinking. Future thinking requires unlearning and relearning. It challenges inherited labels. It questions systems without losing compassion. It moves from deficit to asset. Hope filled thinking asks, what strengths are present here? How can we build on those strengths? What brilliance might I be overlooking as an educator? What growth is possible? It refuses to reduce students to statistics. It refuses to let old narratives dictate outcomes. And finally, let's talk about talking. Remember that life and death is in the power of the tongue. So it is very important that we talk positively about our students. We talk positively about our teachers. We talk positively about our educational system. The way that we talk about our students, our families, our system, our people, it can build hope or it can erode hope. And here at Get Life, we are all about building future hope. Future focused talking is respectful. Future focused talking is forgiving. Future focused talking is about resilience. Future focused talking is about erasing the limits and being solution centered. It avoids labeling and it leans into possibility. Instead of saying these kids can't, we say these students are capable. Our families are capable. Our parents are capable. Our communities are capable. Instead of saying that these parents don't care. We say these families deeply care. How can we talk positively and partner together to be better together? Instead of saying that this community is broken, we say that this community has strength and we build upon that strength. Teaching, thinking, talking, choosing the T. That is how hope for the future happens. That is how hope becomes operation. Because when schools commit to hopeful teaching, we empower positive talk. We create environments where students do not just survive, they thrive. They do not just endure school, they experience belonging within the school. When students grow up in spaces where hope is modeled consistently, they carry that hope into their families and into their communities. That is cultural inclusivity in motion. That is involvement. That is transformational. Which slides me right into my next point. We cannot ignore that in America, Black history began with trauma. The forced arrival of Africans, enslavement, family separation, systematic oppression, these are undeniable facts in our history. But trauma alone cannot define a student's history or identity. And in a cultural, inclusive classroom, we must build a bridge that leads from trauma to triumph. Again, choosing the T. That bridge is made up of resilience. It is built on strength. It is forged in the courage of those who fought for justice, for freedom, for dignity. When we teach Black history this way, students see not just what was taken from people, but what they built despite what was taken from them. They see ingenuity, strategy, and growth. I want to take a moment to talk about teaching Black history in a way that is both truthful and empowerment. From trauma to triumph, using that approach, because we do know that Black history began with forced slavery, displacement, legalized segregation, systematic violence. Those are undeniable realities. However, if we look at African American history through a lens of trial, tribulation, to a building bridge that leads to triumph, it will help our students to see themselves not as victims, but as victors. We also cannot ignore that while we live in a world that is shaped by oppression, where ideas and labels are handed down and are often inaccurate, limiting, or simply unexamined. Take this for example, how an entire race of people are described as Black. I look at my own skin every day, and I will always be labeled as a Black woman when my skin is actually brown. Why is this? What does this mean? As a person can also have skin that can have a pale tint to it. I have never seen a white person in my life, but somehow this labeling sticks and the assumptions also come along with it. This is part of the unlearning that we are called to do. And it is heavy work. It is complex work. It is work that challenges how we see ourselves, how we see others, our students, and the world around us. But here is the empowering truth. Just because something has been misnamed, misunderstood, miscommunicated does not mean that it defines our potential. The unlearning is not a burning, it is an opportunity. It is an invitation to reclaim who we are, to build spaces where students and people are seen fully, named correctly, and valued for who they are inside the content of their character. And that is exactly what culturally responsive and culturally inclusive teaching allows us to do. It allows us to honor lived experiences, to center students' identities, and teach history, including Black history, not only as a struggle, but as a story of resilience and triumph. We are not simply recounting trauma, we are empowering students to see themselves as inheritors of brilliance, as creators of culture, and architects of change. That is why teaching Black history in a culturally responsive school is not just an academic exercise, it is a reclamation of narrative, a celebration of triumph, and a practice of equity and justice. So today we step forward with awareness, we step forward with courage, we step forward ready to teach, to learn, and to celebrate history that shapes identity, builds pride, and inspires purpose. Teaching, thinking, talking, choosing the T. For example, we start by acknowledging pre-enslavement African civilizations like the Mali Empire or the Songhai Empire, places, learning, governments, art, and trade. Students must understand that African American people had thriving societies before the trauma of enslavement. That knowledge gives dignity and context. Then we teach about slavery and oppression, not by dwelling on it, not by focusing on the suffering, but by highlighting the resilience. Stories of courage like Harriet Tubman, who not only escaped bondage, but led others to freedom, showed agency and brilliance under impossible circumstances. We teach the civil rights movement not only as a struggle, but as brilliant organization and strategy. Dr. Martin Luther King, he is an elevator. He exemplified how leadership, coalition building, and moral courage can change systems. Students learn that triumph is learned through and earned through persistence, intelligence, and vision. We also celebrate cultural achievements from the Harlem Renaissance and its poets like Langston Hughes to inventors like Katherine Johnson and entrepreneurs like Madam C.J. Walker. These lessons show students that Black history is full of perseverance and creativity, innovation, leadership, not just pain. Remember, from trial to triumph and from pain to purpose. Teaching this way allows students to experience Black history as a living, empowering story. They see that despite trauma, their ancestors built schools, businesses, communities, and movements. They learn that resilience and moral courage are not abstract, they are inherited. In a culturally inclusive school, students of all backgrounds benefit. African American students feel pride in their heritage, confidence in their identity, and inspiration to lead. Non African American students may understand empathy and respect for a history and culture that shaped America. And perhaps most importantly, this approach teaches that triumph is not about the past. It's about how students live now, how they learn now, how they think now, how they contribute to society today in classrooms, schools, and communities. So when we teach Black history from trauma and trial to triumph, choosing the T, we're not ignoring suffering. We are honoring it. We are also celebrating victory, celebrating resilience, celebrating humanity, giving hope for our future, creating a school's culture where students can see themselves as capable, powerful, and fully belonging. Because inclusion is not just about access, it is about experience, identity, and triumph and victory. And here's one core shift: trauma says, this happened to us, whereas triumph says, this is how we responded. Trauma focuses on harm, triumph focuses on resilience, intelligence, creativity, faith under pressure. Both are true, but where we end the lesson emotionally truly matters. Students should not leave any Black history lesson thinking that my history is pain. They should leave thinking my history is power. And that is a very different type of inheritance, one that allows students to experience Black history or African American history, not just as a story of survival, but as a story of triumph. In a culturally responsive and inclusive environment, this approach doesn't just inform students, it empowers them, it teaches them, it helps them to think. It helps them to see themselves as capable, proud, and fully belonging as students, as community members, and as our future. So, the key to this is don't teach trauma as identity, teach trauma as context, and teach triumph as legacy. Teach triumph as empowerment. Teach triumph as the strength to move on and press towards the mark. Here's how that can look in practice. First, we begin with humanity, not enslavement. Even though the African American timeline did begin with forced arrival, ground students with pre enslavement identity, as we mentioned before, like the West African civilizations, the Maui Empire. And as we continue with teaching, thinking, talking, choosing the T, triumph, we also want to make present day success visible without pretending that the struggle is over. Triumph does not mean that everything is fixed. It means that despite systematic barriers, excellence still persists. Students should walk away knowing that there is still hope for their future. Even though there's still work to do, they have come a long way from a lineage of builders and overcomers. Let's protect the emotional balance in the classroom, avoiding graphic reenactments or centering brutality. However, we can pair difficult lessons with stories of courage. Ask students, what students help people survive? What leadership strategies do you notice? What lessons apply today? This keeps students in the empowerment mode. And that brings us to the bigger picture because teaching history this way does more than influence, it builds strong relationships. Inclusivity isn't just a policy, it is a practice that strengthens connection between students, teachers, families, and the community. When students see their identities reflected and respected in their environment, when their names are pronounced correctly, when their cultures are honored, their voices are heard, and they feel seen, they feel valued. And that feeling opens the doors to connection. In classrooms, inclusivity allows teachers and students to trust each other. When students trust their teachers to honor who they are, they engage more deeply, they participate more fully, they take intellectual risks because they know that they belong. Remember the song, Sometimes You Want to Go Where Everybody Knows Your Name? This is very true with our students as well. Inclusivity also strengthens peer relationships. When students learn about each other, their cultures, experiences, and perspectives, empathy grows, stereotypes break down, friendships form across differences, cooperation and collaboration increases. It doesn't stop at the school door. Inclusive practices extend to families. When schools invite families to participate, when communication respects language and culture, trust builds tremendously. Parents feel like partners. Teachers gain insight. Students feel supported both at school and at home. And when these inclusive relationships are mirrored in the wider community, the impact multiplies. Communities thrive when members feel respected, represented, and connected. People invest in each other. Shared goals become achievable. Networks of care and mentorship develop naturally. So, inclusion isn't just nice to have, it is the foundation of a strong relationship. It creates environments where students, staff, and families, communities grow together, succeed together, and belong together. Because at the heart of inclusion is connection. And connection is what makes a school a community. As we bring this time together to an end, let's take a moment to affirm the power of inclusion for our schools. We affirm that every student's name is honored. Say their names. We affirm that every staff member's name is honored, their voice is honored, their feelings are honored. Every voice is heard and every learned space is safe amongst everyone. It is full of hope and possibility. We affirm that teachers, staff, and students work together to create a culture of respect, trust, and care. For our families, we affirm that families are valued partners in education. We affirm that love, guidance, and wisdom shape the next generation. We affirm that culture, knowledge, tradition, and stories are celebrated and shared. We affirm for communities that every person matters. Connections across differences strengthen in our neighborhoods. We affirm that resilience, courage, and creativity are honored and nurtured. And now, let us bow our heads for a moment of prayer. Gracious Father, our Creator, we thank you for the gift of community, of learning and belonging. Bless our schools that they may be spaces of respect and curiosity, as well as growth. Bless our families that they may nurture and support children with love and wisdom. Bless our communities that they may be filled with understanding, compassion, and hope. Give us courage to honor each other. Give us courage to honor every name, every story, every voice. Give us wisdom to teach history with truth, context, and triumph. Give us hearts that listen, hands that build, and spirits that unite. May the work that we do in our classrooms, homes, and neighborhoods create spaces where every person feels seen, valued, and empowered. And it is in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. And it is so. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we shared together. We begin by honoring the hearts and hands that make education possible. Our educators, parents, caregivers, mentors, community members, each of you show up day in and day out, pouring love, patience, and purpose into our students' lives. We talked about the power of cultural inclusivity, how honoring names, respecting identities, and building trust creates strong relationships. In schools, families, and communities, inclusion is more than just a policy, it is a foundation for connection, empathy, collaboration, and love. We also examine how to teach, think, and talk, choosing the T. We talked about Black history from a trauma to triumph lens. Also, choosing the T, acknowledging the reality of oppression, but centering resilience in leadership and cultural brilliance. Black history is not about struggle, it is about courage, strategy, creativity, resilience, empowerment, triumph. In a culturally responsive school, students experience history not as a weight of pain, but as a legacy of power and purpose and possibility. Family, our takeaways are that inclusion builds relationships, respect of identities, teaching history with context and triumph, inspires pride and agencies in every one of us. We all play a role in creating spaces where belonging is not optional, but it is essential. So as you leave this broadcast today, carry those truths with you. You are seen, you are valued, you are essential, each and every one of you. Students, parents, community members, the work you do, the love you give, the attention you pay to identity, purpose, voice, it all matters. It shapes lives, it shapes futures. Let's continue to get it together. Let's continue to live in full expectancy, empower education in our schools, families, home, and communities. We're going to stay inspired. We're going to stay empowered. Let's remember to get life in power education. Until next time, now and forever, get it together. Live in full